This is Music Moneyball, the podcast that explores how to unlock the hidden value in music catalogues. Brought to you by Standard Innovation, the data consultancy for investment funds. Welcome back to the Music Moneyball podcast with me, Emma Griffiths, and my co-hosts Tom Mullen and Sam Morey. Today, we are joined by a guest who is a musician turned data-driven entrepreneur who's helping reshape how the music industry understands its own value. He started out as a session musician, which included touring with the one and only Elton John, before transitioning into the business side of music in 2014. His first publishing venture, Bespoke, grew into a renowned indie publisher with cuts from the likes of Avril Lavigne, Machine Gun Kelly and the Vamps, before being acquired in 2023. Since then, he's worked with some of the most iconic catalogues in music as a partner at ATM Catalogue Management, before striking out on his own to launch Fix Music in 2025, where he and his team use AI-powered technology to fix rights data and help catalogue owners unlock new revenue potential at scale. Please welcome Henry Marsden.
Thank you so much.
My first question before we get into any of this other interesting stuff is, can you help us get Elton on the podcast? That's priority number one for 2026.
That's the only reason I'm here, isn't it? I'm just your in.
You could just get him on speed dial now for us, Henry.
Let me just wait one second. Let me just call him up.
So, Henry, we like to kick things off by, helping to paint a picture of our guests. And I think there's no better way, really, than to say, if we could introduce you with a song, what would that song be?
Such a good question. I was thinking about this. Obviously, it had to be one from my own catalogue. I had this phenomenal keyboard player friend. So, as you mentioned, I was a musician, session-based player. And I toured around all these different bands and sort of playing for different artists, and I had this one friend keyboard player that we did a few different bits and bobs with, and during sound checks he would just sort of noodle around the piano, and over sort of this 2, 3, 4, 5 month period his noodles became more structured, and he's an incredible singer as well. He basically was just sort of slowly composing his own work, and he was one of the reasons that I got into music publishing, because he basically wrote all these songs that were incredible, that no one ever he had no outlet for them or no idea of what to do with them. I was like, mate, I'll just help you put these out. There must be some way we can you obviously have a natural gifting, but you don't necessarily have these ins, and you don't necessarily understand how the industry side of stuff works or music publishing works. So I'll help you put these songs out. So only one of these songs is called Carnegie Hall. His artist, he's called Sam Cox, and his artist name is called Outlines. You can find it on Spotify. And he never did anything crazy, but the song is all about you got to live your dreams. You got to go for it. And in this song, he tells a story of this guy who sort of dreams of playing one day in Carnegie Hall and wondering what that'll feel like. And then the bridge is this refrain of "Long live the daydreamers, God save us all." And just every time I hear that lyric, even saying it now, I'm like, oh my goodness. So it gets me of that's how I want to live my life, my career. One, supporting friends, helping them get paid where I can't write a song for toffee, but I could help them, maximize their own creativity. And then two, what happens if we daydream? What happens if you really go for your dreams and live a life and live a career, build a business in a way that's what's possible? Where could this go? How big could this go? So I've gone so deep so immediately.
That's amazing. That's exactly what we want. There's some emotion there. There's a bit of depth to it.
So Henry, you have had quite the journey from working with songwriters and artists to now helping funds and catalogue owners untangle the mess that is music data. But before we get into the weeds, how did you get into this part of the industry?
As you say, it's been a long journey, and a fun one at that, and always driven by learning and just evolving what I was doing to best serve effectively people who are my friends, like creators. So I started, as I mentioned, as a session musician, and then started what I thought would be a record label originally. It was I was quite cool to say you have a record label, and it housed some of the production work I was doing as a musician. But then all my creative friends said, we don't need a record label. It was the record label no one ever wanted to sign to. But they all asked, do you do publishing? Do you understand publishing? Do you know publishing? Can you help me with publishing? I feel like I'm being screwed in my deal, or I don't understand where my revenue's coming from. So I realized it would be better to pivot this label into a music publishing company, signed the songs of my friends like Sam, friends of friends, friends of friends, and the whole catalogue just sort of slowly grew. And as it grew, managing that repertoire became tricky with the tools like Excel, Google Sheets, like sort of basic tools.
At that stage, Henry, how many songs are we talking about? Like, where was the kind of tipping point where you got to a stage, right, can do it in Excel, this is becoming tricky, now impossible?
I think, to be honest, it wasn't even that many. Like, by the time you get to like 1,000 songs, because you've got copyright data, publishing data, recordings data on one hand, and all of those are interlinked. So you already have like 3, 4, 5 different data sets that need to be talking to one another, which if you're very, very well organized and have a good spreadsheet, you can manage. But then you've got the royalty side as well. And as the number of lines, particularly in a digital age, like noting my publishing company started in 2014 and went through to a decade of sort of digital innovation, the number of lines per sort of usage, per royalty statement would just grew exponentially. So then being able to manage those on the other side just became an impossible task, because it sort of went into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, but even like a very, very, very small catalogue, every single microtransaction the world over just became impossible to manage.
And was that across all of the different geographies that you were publishing as well, or was that just in kind of a couple of major ones?
No, just across everything, because music consumption is so global now. Like, I was in a conference the other day and heard a panelist say, no one uploads a track and just geo-locks it to certain territories. Basically, every song gets released globally from any territory. So all your usage as well, via whatever source it comes back, whatever pipeline it works its way back to you, the usage is global. And so you're trying to collate from however you're collecting revenue, particularly on the publishing side, which is my sort of most experienced area, just so many disparate lines worth of data. And I'm sure we'll get into data and how this, how it affects revenue flows and rights holders now. But this is sort of my journey into the industry, is just learning this firsthand, that I'm trying to look after these songs for my friends. And then I get a call saying, hey, I've got 1 million streams on Spotify. How much are going to be paid? When am I going to be paid? Or I had someone send me a video of their song playing at halftime at Old Trafford. And they'd be like, this is amazing. Like, isn't this incredible? How much money am I going to see for this? When am I going to see it? Or another friend text, that's why it always happens on videos. Someone sent me a video of their song playing in a Gap in Hong Kong. They're like, isn't this incredible? Like, this store is like got my song on their playlist. Where's my whatever $1 million check? But I couldn't answer their questions as their publisher. Like, this is my responsibility to look after their rights and to get them paid efficiently. And I couldn't tell them.
There's like an anecdote that we've heard from a number of people, and in general, a lot of people in the industry. It's like that question of, oh, I heard my song played on the radio. When and how much am I going to get paid? And everybody's answer is sometime in the future, not really sure.
Yeah, exactly. And for creators, and this has sort of been the entire story of my career, they don't naturally understand the mechanisms by which they're paid, or how one usage somewhere, particularly abroad, like if you're going through sort of international channels, how that generates revenue and how that revenue gets back to them and through which parties and how much of a cut they're taking. Like, there's just no line of sight. It's complicated for people who work in publishing, let alone the people who are fed by publishing, the creators themselves. So it's like this impossible task of them trying to figure out, or trying to run a business effectively, like a small scale business with revenue and costs, but they have no line of sight to how their revenue is generated, where it's generated, why it's generated, or who takes pieces along the way. And as I say, that is where I've sort of built my career, is helping creators understand the industry side of things, and then trying to help the industry see how creators operate and like bridge that gap. And that came about from doing like the administration of my own publishing catalog, and seeing like I couldn't answer these questions that I was getting called about on a Saturday night as the person who was responsible for their copyrights, for their repertoire. So I dug deeper, and I did sort of two things. I dug deeper and deeper into the macro industry, like how these payment pipelines work. Like when I started, I did PRS and the UK directly, because like, well, I'm here, like I'll figure out how to do it by doing it in myself, and then I'll have an administrator who does the rest of the world, every other territory for me. And I naively thought at the time that they just then went and got direct money from Spotify and all the different sources. And only over time did I start to realize, oh, hang on, they're relying on other third parties beyond them. And sometimes those third parties are relying on another third party, fourth party beyond them. Like there's so many intermediaries. And sometimes I had this one funny story. I toured in South Africa, and the artist I was touring with was like, oh, I'm going for a meeting with my publisher in Africa. I was like, oh, that's interesting. He's like, oh, you're into publishing, aren't you? Like, why don't you come along and just be nice to say hey? So I went to this meeting, this person, and then they were like, oh, you're from Bespoke. I was like, oh yeah, that's funny. Like, how the heck have you heard of my like tiny record label from England, a publisher from England? They're like, oh, we look after your catalogue. Like, do you? I've never heard of you. So, oh yeah, we rep the catalogue of your administrator. It's like, oh, that's mad. Gosh, so I've given my rights to this other third party, who's then given my rights to you. Like, oh well, can you send me a spreadsheet of all the data you've got for my catalogue, and I'll just help check it and make sure you've got everything you need. Like, sure. At the time, I had 750, 800 songs. They sent me a spreadsheet with 12 songs in. They're like, here's your catalogue. You're like, you are kidding me. And this sort of exemplifies one of the many problems with publishing, that the data shared and the pipelines it has to go through, there's just this constant sort of erosion of quality or even quantity of data that passes through. And my direct administrator was pretty peed off at the time, because I sent them a grumpy email being like, excuse me, like there's not even like a fraction of my catalogue you have registered in Africa. Sure, we don't generate tons of revenue in Africa, but if it's not right in Africa, is it right in America or other markets that are much bigger? But it sort of speaks to, so I did these two things. One was learning how the industry really, really works, and then immediately trying to evolve my model, licensing, administration, collection frameworks to improve that efficiency, and then building my own data tools to make that more scalable as well. So I ended up building my own royalty accounting software. I built my own sort of data manipulation, like basically catalog management system that then could deliver CWRs, common works registration formats, which is like a nerdy way that publishers exchange catalog information at scale. But I did all these things myself to learn how it would work, and then got very interested in those two sides, the macro elements and the sort of tech side of copyright management in the publishing sense. And then that sort of fell me down a hole of data, of which I'm still, I'm still trying to climb out of, to go with the analogy. Yeah, I think I'm actually just still digging deeper. I'm sort of still digging for gold.
I think that's like the case for everyone, though, isn't it? In that there's so much data, and if you use your example there, Henry, as a typical example across the industry, relatively small publisher, but there's quite a few like small publishers globally, or quite a lot of small publishers globally, and then there's obviously like different tiers, and then the data problems just multiply, right? So you just end up with this kind of like spaghetti in the middle. It's kind of one of the things we wanted to draw out a little bit today, because I think a lot of funds look at music as a passive investment. For a long time now, streaming revenue's grown, and valuations based on revenue that's pulling through. So it's quite a stable asset class on that basis, and there's been organic growth coming through. So, like, do you think with all this kind of data challenges, that challenge in the middle, like, are they missing a trick on ways to further improve their valuations?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I've seen over the years, that I've done it for my friends directly, and then also for my own small indie publishing catalogue, and then for larger friends independent catalogues, and all the way through to working on some of the most iconic large scale catalogues, in terms of both individual artists, but also aggregated with publishers. And the problems are all the same. Like, literally, it's the same sort of thing, same data exchange, same making sure registrations exist everywhere. And it's massively exacerbated by the fragmentation of rights, which, acquisitions as well, in a sense, have, I was going to say made worse, but they've just made more extreme. But it means that the management of copyright, like, you don't buy, it's not an asset that you buy that will just sit there passively and then just bring in this this revenue, and you don't have to do anything about it. It needs proactive management, proactive cleaning to, at a bare minimum, receive the same amount of yield, let alone try and increase that yield. And I think there's significant gains to be made by those that hold publishing rights, either publishers or those that are acquiring them, to focus on data and how data flows around the industry and building those pipelines efficiently and being able to have transparency to those pipelines for them then to be able to maximize the assets that they've bought. Like in a digital age where your single asset can be fragmented so many times, you need to be able to track where it goes, where it is, and is it accurate everywhere. Like in a simplified case, one song can be written by one person, can be signed or acquired by one entity, and then that's got to be accurate and registered in 350, 400 different places globally for then one DSP, like a Spotify, to be able to have it available and correctly licensed internationally. So it's 350 different places you've got to ensure that data is accurate, let alone if someone else comes and records that song, or if you've got a song that is incredibly popular, it's going to generate a lot of covers, and those covers will also be generating their own revenue, but via microtransactions. You've got these trillions of lines worth of data that you need to be able to sift through at scale, and really critically, economically. Like it's not worth spending $1 going and chasing 10 cents. But in aggregate, the long tail of value that's left on the table is so vast, it is worth getting, but only if you can do that economically. And that means tech, that means scalable tools, that means that one human can sort of go and get all the value at once.
Not going to work on a spreadsheet, is it?
No.
But I think, I suppose we're relatively new to the music industry, and it's very easy to completely be unaware of actually some of the challenges. And so I would say it's probably fair for a number of people that maybe even just already involved in the music industry, maybe completely unaware of some of the challenges that exist. So why don't we try and unpack some of those things, like give us some real world examples of sort of challenges you've seen in people with managing large catalogs. What does it involve? Things like metadata. What's a black box? How does all that kind of stuff work?
There's so many things we could discuss here. I mean, to pick up on one, like Tom just mentioned, you can't manage it in a spreadsheet, but every royalty statement that a fund would receive having made an acquisition will be some sort of spreadsheet, some sort of CSV, Excel, or God forbid, PDF. And they've got to manipulate this data from disparate sources, which all effectively says the same thing. Like it's got the asset, probably an identifier, and even that is not necessarily a guarantee. Something about where the money came from, how much, when it was earned, and possibly some sort of usage type. Like, was it performance revenue? Was it mechanical revenue, sync revenue, whatever? But the way that data comes across in those spreadsheets is so different source to source to source. But if you're a multi-billion-dollar fund, you've got to know and be on top of all of that information. You've got to be able to aggregate it into one centralized place so that A, you can model deals that you're going to buy into, and then B, you can track the performance of those or know the impact of certain macro trends in the industry. Like BMI just announced within the last couple of weeks new rates for radio. But if you own songs that over-index on radio, you're going to want to know, okay, if BMI's rate goes up by 5%, how much is my fund going to go up by 5%? Or CRB, the US court set rates for mechanicals in the US. Again, your catalog is going to be impacted, or the revenue that you get is going to be impacted by those sort of cultural or political moves that are outside your control. But unless your data is at a granular level where you can identify which rows are affected by that, then you can't model it. So that's just one element, let alone the whole copyright side.
And this is all just to keep at a stable level, right? If you don't do those things, then actually your revenue is going to be degrading over time. And I know one of the interesting things about the asset class is it looks to be not inflation proof, but is correlated with inflation in a way that it's favorable. But if actually you can't overlook all of those other changes, which can bring in huge administrative efforts or oversights that if you miss actually is going to start to degrade that revenue over time. I think that's hugely important too. And, we're not even talking about increasing the revenue or identifying other opportunities for investment. We're just talking about kind of staying static on.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest things with particularly people with a finance background coming into the music industry, is helping them understand that, again, particularly on the publishing side, to even achieve the yield that it has been, that you've based your transaction upon, but your purchase price is built on historic revenue. To even get that same revenue, it needs proactive management and sort of tracking. Like a silly example is that in publishing, I would never move a catalogue more than once in like an 18-month period. And most people that have worked in publishing just sort of know that, because they understand how long it takes societies to update registrations, to deduplicate registrations.
When, just for the audience's sake, when you mean move a catalogue, what exactly are you referring to?
Like if the rights holder changes, if someone has acquired a piece of the catalogue, or you need to update the registration status at collection societies to say, hey, look, now I'm the new owner, or this is the new publisher, or this person is now looked after by Cobalt instead of Universal, or whoever, or Hypnosis sell a huge chunk to Sony ATV or whatever. The catalogue needs to be updated in societies, but getting it updated is not a quick process. And then ensuring it is correctly updated is also not a quick process. So then there's a sort of 18-month to 2-year lag of making sure your catalogue is registered how you would expect it to be registered. And again, this is just but one example of the ways that people who hold rights need to be on top of those rights, managing them and understanding not only what their view of the rights and the data is, and this all comes down to metadata really, but what is that view at other places? Like I think, and I see this all the time with catalogues. In fact, I saw this exact thing for a catalogue I did an analysis on within the last 2 months. They had 150,000 songs, just for a publisher. And they said, they sent me the catalogue data. This is how we see our catalogue. Like we own this percentage in these sets of songs that are registered, that should be connected to these recordings. And we immediately found in some key societies, like where huge tranches of their revenue is coming from, that some of those songs, and big songs as well, were registered to their competitor. They just had never moved across, like for whatever reason. So it's like, we think we own 100% of this song, and you look at the registration, the people who are paying them, and they're saying, no, it's 100% your competitor. And maybe there's some like conflict to resolve there. And then there's a process for conflict. But if you aren't aware of that, you're literally watching money go to someone else. These guys were literally watching money go to their competitor rather than them.
What about like metadata, Henry? That's an area that, again, if you haven't come from the music industry, you wouldn't necessarily know what that can fuel in terms of revenue opportunities. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, metadata is like the other side of the coin to revenue. Like you have to tell people, I own this song on behalf of this person, and here is information that describes it so you can identify it out in the world. And you give that information to people who are then using the music. So then they can say, okay, great, we definitely know we used this piece of this music, and this percentage of the revenue that generated should go back to this party. So there's always this constant flow of revenue is basically always needs to be in exchange for data, for metadata. And is a direct correlation between the accuracy of the metadata and the comprehensiveness of that metadata with then how much you get paid. So, you'll see if it's a generic title, like I Love You, like think how many songs are called I Love You and how many recordings there are called I Love You. And are all those recordings associated to the right song? They're only associated when the metadata aligns enough for people to make a confident decision that they are associated. So you can have a direct impact on your revenue by telling those people, i.e. societies, people who are doing this matching work, hey, this song is written by these people. Hey, this recording is a recording of this song, which then has these composers in. and it has this exact title and this alternative title and this title in this language. And the ISRC code, which identifies that recording, should be linked to the ISWC, which identifies this composition. All of those points are metadata. And when you start to manage catalogues of 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, million plus works, that is not a easy task. It is challenging, particularly when rights pictures change. So, the four of us write a song. We each assign it to each of our publishers. That's now 4 publishers, who then perhaps have sub-publishers. But then Emma decides, hey, I'm actually going to move my publisher. And suddenly there's new registrations out in the world that have 3 of the right publishers, but 1 wrong publisher. And that publisher needs to go and, correct them. But then immediately, and this is only like 4 people, 4 publishers, like the number of songwriters on an average hit song has gone up and up and up over the years. And that fragmentation, as well as new parties buying in to the music industry and also buying specific slices or co-investing as well in specific slices, means that the number of places that data is and the number of parties who have a view on that data is just exponentially greater than it ever has been. So making sure they're all aligned is really challenging. And people only get paid if that data is aligned. Like if 3 of us wrote a song, this is another classic example. 3 of us write a song and we say, we'll split the revenue on it, a third. But all databases go to 2 decimal places. So someone is going to pick up 0.01% because we all register at 33.33. But if we all register at 33.34, it's overclaimed. And in some places, it then won't get paid. So who gets that extra piece? But it's all very little granular bits of metadata that affect revenue. And there are times, like if I look back on my entire career and every catalogue I've ever touched, every asset, every publishing song, there are pieces of large tranche of revenue you can find in a certain source if the data is not assigned. Like one time we did a catalogue analysis, found 30 grand for 1 track, just wasn't associated in one database, 1 song, 1 recording, easy as pie. There you go, 30 grand as a one-off. But by and large, most catalogues, it's a small percentage across the entire lot, all the way down from the top, all the way down into the long tail, which again goes back to scalable tools. If every bit of revenue needs to be economically recovered.
So interesting, we spent a good deal of time speaking around all of these vast challenges that the industry presents. And really, I think for most of them, we're talking about kind of fixing the basics. The only one thing that we've touched upon, which gets anywhere near strategy and taking the data and making sensible decisions based on it, is not to move your catalog in a certain period of time. But, I think that just speaks to the complexity of getting the basics right. But after that, once you have the mechanisms, once you have the tools in place, then it feels like it's kind of an open field for those people who have made those investments that do have the right infrastructure, because the decision making that they'll be able to take around either their existing catalog or raising funds for a new one is just going to be so much more clear. And I think that's what's going to set people apart as the industry gets more competitive, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think it's a competitive advantage across so many verticals, like managing catalog, increasing yield better than anyone else can, and identifying undervalued assets. Like I can look today at a catalog and can say there is this much revenue sat in these pots for that catalog that is not currently being extricated, is not going to the rights holder. And if you come along and buy that, then that's pure alpha, that's pure upside that you can take because others haven't been able to identify it. And again, that all comes down to data. And there's just so many ways, again, particularly on the publishing side, because it's so fragmented, that revenue can get misattributed, like poor registrations, duplicate registrations, missing identifiers, and particularly recordings being mismatched to compositions are just some examples. And again, this is where I think funds that really appreciate and bake in data as an infrastructure, like a core infrastructure, a core part of their value delivery, will accelerate beyond others. And that will only increase as time goes on because the world is only becoming more digitized and a higher slice of the revenue pie is coming from digital sources. There's less and less that comes from these sort of other offline places. Or if they are, they're becoming more accurately identified, which again relies on data and metadata. So I think data is the key competitive advantage.
And I think all of this, like, it's kind of like, well, how big is the problem? And we've spoken to some people in the industry, and they've kind of explained how leakage, I suppose, is more, maybe that's a financial sort of way of describing it, is baked into the P&Ls. They just assume, they've got 200 million, 300 million in the catalogue. They just assume like a small percentage of that will just never make it through and bake it in. But in reality, like, from your experience, Henry, like, how accurate is that, like, to make that assumption? Because one thing seems to sort of have a knock-on effect. If you sort the basics out, actually you end up opening new opportunities, right? So
you'll never get every single penny that is correctly due for usage of your music back to you, let alone in an economical, a worthwhile ROI, manner. But there is this baseline of, if you do these things right, if you do these key like data management tasks, or empower your team with scalable tools to be able to look at and collect revenue, you can increase that threshold and bring it down. You have global usage, more and more so, or licensed via localized copyright law and licensing bodies. And those two things are forever at odds with one another. So that system will, in all likelihood, never really go away, although it has evolved over the last few years with sort of different copyright hubs and things.
Yeah. But I think generally, like, assuming it's a 2-3%, it's never going to come through. They could be undercalling it, right? It could be more than that.
Yeah, like vastly so. But again, the more rights you aggregate, like, again, from my experience, there is probably 5 to 10% uplift that could be done with just sheer accuracy of data. But every now and again, and this is what everyone wants.
Like, that is incredible, given that the valuations are ultimately based on a multiple of historic cash flow.
And even a 10 times multiple, that's,
Yeah, if you're timesing anything by 10, that's a big number. And if that's a 10% increase just because you've made the right investments in data, you've put the right systems in place, you've got visibility, I think just on the very basics, that's giving you a significant return, let alone looking at all of the other possibilities and making better decisions and having a clearer strategy for the future as the industry becomes more competitive. I mean, that just seems incredibly compelling to me.
Yeah, no, totally. And the thing is, everyone always looks for the gold. Like, you dig around, and you will be able to find this, whatever, 5 to 10%. But also, every now and again, you find a much, much bigger lump that is like a huge material piece of, we worked on a catalogue, and we found a huge, like, whatever you'd say, like 6-figure sum. And the catalogue was only turning over a few million. So it's like a really material piece, and they're looking to sell. So it's like, you've literally just found millions and millions of dollars for the seller. Like, and again, everyone is looking for those pots of gold, and not every catalogue has these, or landmines, depends which way you want to phrase them. Like, not everyone has these sort of buried treasure. Not every catalogue has it, but on average, probably the number is more like 20 to 25% if you're aggregating rights in bulk. So when you start to get to 100,000, 500,000, a million copyrights, you're more likely, there is a higher frequency that those pots of gold exist. So then your average rate becomes more like 20 to 25.
But having the rigor of managing it, in the right way, having all the kind of foundations in place are kind of necessary to find those in the first place, but also sets you up for everything else, right? With AI coming, I'm sure we'll come to AI at some point, but that's going to be critical for getting revenue from AI in future, right? Or AI generated music. So
it all comes down to like knowing where to look and having the tools to look there at scale. And if you just do that in a very methodical way, you find money. It's not necessarily rocket science.
Yeah, I think as well, at least from our experience, when people are making investments into companies, or whether it be public traded stocks, obviously the control over theirs is less, but in general, investors are interested in visibility and no surprises. And yes, there could be downsides. Yes, there could be upsides. But most people, as long as you can factor them in, then you have a plan, and that gives you a clear idea of where you're going to go, and that allows you to make investment decisions and have a bit more confidence. And I think that, a lot about what we're saying is really understanding the data properly gives you clarity. That clarity gives you confidence. And with that confidence, then you can make better decisions. And yeah, in the odd catalog, you might find a bit of a landmine here, but invariably that might offset itself with some other missing revenues that you find somewhere else, or at least it's going to give you a really good understanding of this is where we're at. These are the opportunities that we now have to go and improve that. And just kind of coming off the back of that, given the complexity of the underlying data sources, what do you think are the challenges, and what do you think the learning curve looks like for new financial investors coming into the industry looking at music as an asset class?
I think it should definitely not be, and perhaps every industry has its own nuance, but there is a lot of nuance in music that I think people coming into it for the first time are overwhelmed by or don't appreciate. So I think acknowledging that off the bat is key. I also think then the technology side is critical. Like, you have all this, like if you look at like a data room, for example, that a seller will provide to a broker or a fund that's acquiring, like here's all you need to have a look at our assets. Go and analyze and give us a number. Like, the quality of the data in that data room will also directly dictate, or your ability to analyze and filter and apply your model to that will directly affect what value you can offer, and knowing what value you can then create once you've made that transaction. So I think the technology side, the data side, and having a toolkit and expertise, the two things in tandem, to go after the right things. And I think as well that is also an element of experience, that you start to know, yes, we'll probably find some revenue here, but it won't be as high as we think it is because of our past experience. Or we'll know, or I mentioned before, the sort of checklist of places you know where to check, and you have tooling that allows you to check them. That will be ever growing. Like, we know a catalogue of this type, of this size, of this vintage, in this genre, we'll need to look in these places more than we will these other places, perhaps for a different catalogue.
It feels like it's that kind of typical curve, and I can't remember who invented or puts their name to it, but the more and more you understand, the more and more you understand, the less you know, right? We can add the name in the edit, I'm sure, but just overlay it on the screen. But I think that that it seems so typical here, as we've spent the last probably 4 to 6 months really getting deep into all of the data challenges that the music industry introduces, and we're scratching the surface. And I think even with your level of experience on both sides, as you said before, you're kind of still digging, and I think it feels like it's a problem that's never going to be solved, but it's something that has to be continually worked on. And given the lifespan, the estimated lifespan of these catalogs for the copyright period, the copyright expiration, people are investing in these assets for maybe 100 years, and the data ecosystem is going to change so rapidly, even in the next 5 to 10 years. I think we don't even know what 100 years looks like. And in other industries, similarly, we've seen where people start to put the foundations in, start to make those investments, start to build out the capabilities and competencies. They, in 5 years' time, find themselves way ahead of the competition in a way that it makes it extremely difficult for the competition to catch up, just because there's such a gulf between them. And I get the sense that it's only going to be the same in this industry too.
Yeah. Like, the big funds are realizing this and waking up to it, but they, like societies, have this sort of legacy business and operations and infrastructure to navigate and evolve and transition, whereas the new entrants are also clocking this, but with a clean slate. and they can begin from the off to bake that in now. And that'll be a continually evolving process. And again, with AI, like Sam mentioned, that is a like watershed game changer in so many ways. Tech development, data analysis, generative like content. There's so many verticals of which that touches and affects. And if you're not set up for data now, that's going to be critical for, like, as you say, the next 5-10 years, let alone then into the future.
Yeah. And Henry, on that note, I think we'll definitely get more onto AI in a second. But let's say that in an ideal world, you've got that tooling in place, you've established those basics, you've fixed as many leaks as you can possibly fix. What does that bring you in terms of potential future upside, and what foundation does that give you to then build upon, and how do you continue to kind of feed and water the catalogue on those foundations?
Yeah, like I think there is a direct line, like a mathematical line between catalog cleanup, clean metadata, clean publishing registrations and ownership picture that's disseminated everywhere, and then the revenue that you see from that. Like, it is marked, because that money does get created, it just doesn't pass through. So understanding of the pipes, clarity of where that money is, and making sure it comes through to you directly then increases the return you can make. And then once you've got that, once you sort of, especially when you first made an acquisition, there's all this effort in making sure everyone pays you rather than someone else. Then you've got this solid foundation then to build on top of. Like, that any proactive marketing effort you do, or sync or whatever, or like, getting the song recut by someone, will then have that percentage baked in, because it's accurate. And I know that when that broadcast gets syndicated onto another channel or whatever, it'll correctly make the revenue for that generated by that will make its way back through to me. So I think it also sort of maximizes all the efforts across other more overtly proactive realms. Like, people don't think of administration as a proactive or a profit-making like activity, but arguably it is as much so as something like a sync or a marketing department. And those are only supercharged by having administration incredibly watertight.
Our thought process is that if you can get those foundations in place, it's not just about fixing the basics, so to speak, but it's getting the infrastructure in place that allows you to take advantage of those opportunities in the future ultimately.
And Henry, how do you think AI is going to have a material impact on all of this, and what should funds be thinking about when they're preparing for this onslaught of whatever is coming our way with AI generated music, but also efficiencies and how to just deal with some of this stuff at scale?
Funnily enough, I think when the first sort of like tendrils of AI started coming through, everywhere I went, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. Creativity at large, human creativity, is going to be, scuppered by an absolute tidal wave of AI generated slop that's good enough for people to consume over human generated creativity. And that's not an unfair analysis. There are elements to worry about in there, but I think what's more exciting is the opportunity AI provides for the administrative tasks, which have like plagued the publishing industry for years, and there are roadblocks in how data is exchanged or analyzed, or rights are like amalgamated or checked, brought together at society level particularly, and at scale particularly, where AI can actually make a drastic difference and supercharge how a human copyright expert can look at and pick apart these sort of tangled meshes. Like, even one example is sync licensing. A supervisor comes along who has relatively shallow level of understanding of copyright ownership and wants to license a track. They need to find who owns this track. Who do I need to go to get this license from? Even that simple task is so tricky, complicated, often impossible for them to locate. You think the people who own it would want to make it like blaringly obvious, advertise, we own this song, if you want to use it, pay us. But that's just not the case. And so they go to this horrendous, there's no one centralized place. They go to this horrible job of like, okay, we've got like, 2/3 signed off. Now we've got 85%, now 87, now 93% signed off. There's one person whose mother has the rights, but she's passed on to someone else. We just can't track them down. We can't use the song. We'll just use something else. But bringing like all those rights together is a task that AI can look at scale and model. And I think applying AI models to realms like that will bring a drastic impact in not very long. And the thing I'm constantly talking about with people that blows my mind about AI is that not only is it this like one watershed moment, it's been like one watershed moment and then another watershed moment, and then even quicker than that, another one. And then the frequency at which game-changing technology or tools is becoming available is decreasing. So the rate at which people are able to evolve is dramatically changing as well, particularly again in terms of like tech, software development, AI analysis tools like that. Like even within the last like year or so, it's just been insane.
One of the things that we have seen though, particularly in the business arena, I think consumer adoption of AI and new technologies has always been a bit faster. And, the devices, the handhelds and everything else, I think really changed that. But actually what we're seeing in businesses is that the adoption is lagging behind, and the rate of new technology is outpacing them so dramatically. And people just don't know where to start. That the change is so vast and the opportunity is so great, and there's so much noise out there. There's so much marketing hype that it is really very difficult for a business to understand, whether that be a financial institution, whether that be an opco. Like, actually, where are we going to start? How are we going to use this? How are we going to find some signal in that noise? And how are we going to start to close that gap? I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was a question as to, is the technology actually suitable for what we need to do? I think that unequivocally has been answered. And now the question is, what's our strategy for using it? How are we going to invest to get there? And I think one of the things that people underestimate is the amount of foundations that they need to put in first before jumping to sticking the roof on your house. You've got to really have your data in place. You've got to have some more menial things that are going on that actually allow you to use those things at a higher level.
Yeah, I think that's a really great place to end on. But Henry, more importantly, what is the song or album that you've just got on repeat, can't get out of your head at the moment?
Well, I've got kids, so forced upon me and like always in my head and on repeat is like K-pop Demon Hunters or Taylor Swift.
There's a theme already on this
Why
podcast.
Is this the same for every guest?
I've gone down a country hole quite recently. So like the last Chris Stapleton record is phenomenal, like phenomenal album. Beautiful songs, incredibly well produced, great musicianship. That's a great record. Or Morgan Wallen's got a new another wicked country one that I've been into. So country vibes.
Nice. Love that. And Henry, I think we've probably got a little bit of a clue from something that I said earlier here, but what was your most memorable gig?
I think probably like supporting Elton was just incredible. And you don't realize until you go to an Elton gig, just the quantity of high, like the number of hits he has is 3 hours of back-to-back hits. Like so few artists can claim to have like a career that spans that many decades with just that level of high output the whole time. And I remember like the first gig, we sort of like finished packing all our stuff down. We're still sort of backstage, and then just sort of saw the band like very casually, very cool, like they've done it for years, stroll up onto stage and then just kick into the first song. And from then onwards is like, oh my gosh. And we just like basically sat down where we were and just watched from backstage. And that was probably, and then we literally did like 14, 15 dates with him. And just like we basically watched the entire set every night, like it didn't get dull. So those are probably some of my most special ones.
Love that. And that's probably, I imagine, connected to my next question, which is, what is your biggest pinch me moment? Probably just sat there watching Elton is...
I was thinking this, like, I've got loads of pinch me moments from being a musician. But actually, I think in the world I'm in now, like I've always been driven by getting creators paid. Like I can't write a song for Toffee, but the people who do write songs should be paid fairly. And if they don't get paid fairly, we'll just end up with homogenous or AI generated slop. Like I like enjoying human creativity, connecting with it, like drawing out emotion from me. So I want to help people get paid who do that so they can do it more sustainably. So actually some of the pinch me moments have been when I've helped someone do that and you give them meaningful revenue, even if it's like a couple of £100 or a couple of £1,000 for some people in one tier, or if it's hundreds of thousands of pounds for others in other tiers, if that helps them keep going and you can see what it means to them as well. Because these things that they've built, like, are their legacy, are their children, are the outpouring of their heart and emotions. Like they've lived this life that has helped them birth this creativity. And then to see it misused, not paid for accurately is like a pain to them. You can see the value you bring in their eyes when you say like, hey, look, we sorted this thing for you. Now it's okay. Yeah, there's money and that's cool and that's a nice plus. But actually, I think it's more than that. And I think some of the biggest pinching moments of when I've worked on like incredible, world famous, culturally iconic catalogs, and then directly with the artists themselves have been able to be like, hey, look, we got this bit sorted. You don't need to worry about it. It's peace of mind now. That's been really special. That's probably a pinch me thing.
So I would like to think that the whole episode so far has sort of been leading up to this question. No pressure, Henry, but what would you say is the most underrated opportunity in music rights investment?
I mean, we've talked about it lots, but definitely data, like appreciation of data, what you can do with data, having clean data, how data can lead you to increase yield, like beyond what your wildest dreams could cope with. Like it is, as I said earlier, directly correlated. Like it is underappreciated and it's just starting to become appreciated, the impact that data can have. And I think those that get that the fastest and are willing to apply tools and even get rid of old tools they had and replace tools they've just built with new tools, like that ability to let go and continually evolve will dramatically make an impact on competitive advantage. And I think that's only just being appreciated now.
Final question, Henry. If you could own one song, what would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. My head says something that like happy birthday or that's like incredibly well used. My heart would say something, actually maybe a good blend is something like Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen. Like,
oh yeah, beauty.
What a song.
Best song ever written, in my opinion.
Yeah, like phenomenal. And you know a great song when it can be recorded by different people in different styles and still speak volumes. So I think from a heart perspective, that one would be a good balance of heart and head and bank balance.
Yeah.
They're very diplomatic. Well, Henry, it's been such a pleasure. So interesting. I feel like, it's given us so much insight into where value can be unlocked across the industry and for investors. So thank you so much. And if our audience wants to get in touch or find you, where should they look?
Go to fixmusic.ai. That's sort of where I'm at. And you can just reach me on henry@fixmusic.ai. If you've got anything with data, publishing, rights, copyright, funds, valuations, money, AI, anything in that realm, data, then come and see us.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Henry, thank you so much.
Thanks, Henry.
Brilliant. Yeah,
Thanks,
that was great fun. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Music Moneyball. If you enjoyed the conversation, you can subscribe at standard-innovation.com to get every episode in your inbox. You can also follow the show on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube to stay ahead of the curve in music rights investment.